Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Loudguns, and today we're going to be looking at building a private military company, or a band of mercenary cutthroats depending on how diplomatic you want to be about it. So Getting Organised is a series where I look at building 5-person, 30-person, 100-person fleets around an org which performs a specific sort of role. What I'm not trying to say is go out and buy these ships. It's more a case of theory crafting where you as a group might want to build your fleet up to, with a view on the final released game once we get it. If you are thinking of buying ships though, hopefully this will show you that you maybe don't need as many as you think you need, particularly if you're planning to work as part of an organisation. So like personally, I have 3 ships that I've pledged for, which to some people might seem totally nuts, and to other people it might seem like a small amount. But the ones that I've got, I've talked to people in my organisation and we've worked to sort of understand what each of us have and therefore sort of how we could fit in complementary ships. What you probably don't want to end up with is sort of too many ships to use for you as an organisation. So first I think we will set a dividing line between a PMC, or a mercenary outfit, and a bounty hunting organisation. So mercs don't tend to need to bring their targets back alive, would be my main point of distinction. There's no reason to say that, organizations can't be more flexible than this. It's part-time mercenaries, part-time bounty hunters. I just find it, for this sort of theory crafting, easier to split them out and consider sort of orgs which are fairly narrowly focused. So in terms of business lines of a mercenary enterprise, I'd be thinking about sort of kill missions. So we've got the current mercenary missions in Stanton. Go here, kill these people who've taken over this mining claim. But further in the future, you might see things like counter-piracy. You might see sort of other organizations or players putting out specific sort of kill targets or kill warrants on other individuals. You can also look at security and protection, so escorting traders and miners, sort of more industrially focused people, while they're making their runs to go and sell. They might pay you a fee for that. And I think sort of the pinnacle of merc work would probably be sort of fighting in wars, if either between player or AI factions. Sort of if we look and do some read across from EVE, where you get huge player coalitions fighting wars, then there's plenty of work generated there for mercenaries. So just before we go on to looking at these fleets that I've put together, just to say that these are just my views, and then more meant as like the starting point for a discussion. So please do get in touch in the comments and say what you would do differently. And you can also come and argue these points with me over on Discord. The link to our Discord is just in the video description down below. So part of the reason I started this series was to try and encourage people, if they're not already, to consider grouping up with an org. So if you'd like to come across, and we run regular events and stuff for bigger groups, so if you'd just like to come and try out some of that, then we'd be happy to have you. And finally, if you're just looking into Star Citizen, if you're sort of watching this to see if it's a game for you, then when you create your account, I'll just flash up my referral code. If you'd like to use that, it will get you some extra credits, and it helps me out too. So with all that said, let's take a look at the first fleet. Fleet, he says, then he gives us one RSI Perseus to look at. So I would basically slim for a 5-person group. I would slim just down to 1 ship, and my one that I would look for would be the Perseus. So the Perseus is good for up to a 6-person crew, but it should easily be operational. With less than that, you might have to consider some NPCs or AI blades, but you should be able to sort of, with a small group, make this ship work. I think the key things is it's got a lot of firepower, so it's got 2 turrets which each have 2 size 7 weapons on them. So I think you definitely want to make sure you've got human players to operate those. I wouldn't be trusting their shots to NPCs. It's got pretty significant range, with a large QT drive, jump drive, and QT fuel tank, along with 2 large hydrogen tanks. And it's also got room to fit that rover. So I've included that for if you wanted to land it down in atmosphere and then maybe go and do a kill mission on foot. But I also do wonder whether we might see in the future like a medical ambulance variant of the rover. Because one of the things I do feel the Perseus lacks here is medical facilities. So if you could add a way to patch yourselves up, then that would be amazing. However, like the counter argument against this I can already hear is why not 5 fighters? So if we've got 5 or 6 of us, we could all jump into an Ares, and then we've got 5 or 6 size 7 weapons versus the 4 that this Perseus has. And I guess my counter argument is I'm trying to think about the range. I'm trying to think about sort of the end game, not about Stanton. So fighters would require something to transport them, and currently the only carrier you could get that many fighters onto is a Kraken. So 5 of you probably wouldn't be enough to run a Kraken, and then also man the fighters off the deck of it. So if you think about your prospective employers for mercenary work, let's just say you come across a whole sea pilot who wants a escort to her next destination. Now, she's probably not going to be too happy if she has to fly that whole sea at the speed of a size 1 quantum drive and sort of stop at every Lagrange point so that you've got enough fuel to make it. But there would be some situations which would allow for 5 fighters. So one thing I would sort of point out is that the idea behind this is what's the best sort of end game fleet for us. And one thing I do have to say about the Perseus is that it's probably one of the worst dollar value ships out there. Very sorry if you own one. And if you want to buy and gift one to me, then I'll happily give you a retraction of that statement. But failing that, I'd probably see sort of 5 mercenary mates, starting out with more combat-oriented single-seaters, and working their way up to this Perseus. So in reality, you'd actually probably have the 5 fighters to fall back on for when that's appropriate. So the info runners actually did a video a couple of days ago about this, which really confirmed my belief in the Perseus, though. If you haven't checked it out, I'd go and look at that video. It was really good. One of the ideas that came out of that I particularly loved was you could use this ship to harass supply lines during a war. So for a small group of mates, that could be a perfect role to fill. So yeah, you're very much on the periphery of a larger battle between 2 orgs. But it's the sort of thing that you can do to really have an impact on a conflict. So back at university, I was a history student. I had an old sort of military history professor who sort of liked to say that war's very complicated, but who wins is usually quite simple. He said it usually boils down to which side can throw more bits of metal at the other side than they're taking in return. And so on scale, wars tend to be won more by logistics than they are by individual fighting prowess. So I can see a smart, larger org hiring small mercenary outfits purely to harass enemy supply lines. Because even if you just succeed in forcing your opponent to assign more pilots to protecting their staff errors and crucibles, then you've won a victory. So if we up the size of the organisation a bit to 30 people, then I'd probably start with the addition of a Polaris as your new flagship. So this is quite a sizable torpedo boat. It's got 24 torpedoes stockpiled and 4 ready to fire in the tubes. So for things like escort work, that might be enough to just scare off potential aggressors. It also gives you a chance to have a bit of a crack at larger capital ships, so things like Idris's, Krakens, etc. Yeah, those size 9 torpedoes are a very real danger to that ship, so you might be able to sort of punch above your weight a bit. And I think for people in sort of a mercenary outfit, that might be really appealing. Sort of, I think a big part of what you're selling is that you're professional soldiers. So you should be able to maybe take on bigger prey than yourselves. A further benefit to the Polaris is it does give you some medical facilities. So that will provide a big boost for your outfit. Sort of mercenaries do run the risk of getting hurt, I hear. So you'll have the ability to patch up the occasional scraped knee. You've also got the benefit of being able to house a fighter to support you. Just a quick note, I've put a RSI Scorpius there, but I'm really not trying to pick specific fighters, just the meta shifts constantly, and it will continue to do so. So if you see fighters in any of my sort of fleet builds, then just see them as a placeholder rather than a I recommend this one. So another key addition is the Crucible, that's the one over on the right. So that's added with a view to maximising the profitability of your organisation, really. So as mercenaries, you're likely to get ships damaged, and you've got some fairly expensive pieces of kit here. So this is just to make sure that you have a repair element, and it's just likely to save you an awful lot of credits keeping your weapons platforms up and running. And finally, I've added a brace of Redeemer gunships. So partly for me, this is just the rule of cool. I think the Redeemer is a fantastic looking ship, but it's also just the sheer amount of firepower it brings with a relatively small crew of 5. So 5 people on board, 4 turrets with 2 size 3s on them, and the pilot's got 2 size 3s. So you've got 10 size 3s on this thing, which is an awful lot of firepower. So I think this can lend itself very well to providing you a bit of an element of anti-fighter. I know a lot of people sort of view the Redeemer as almost like a mini Hammerhead, so not requiring quite as many people to crew. A bit of a sleeker, smaller package, and I think it'll probably be really cool for sort of almost in like a helicopter role, providing support for ground operations. I think it'll really be strong there. And to be fair, this is one of the areas where a 30-person organisation is actually one of the most interesting, because you've got an awful lot of flexibility to sort of specialise your focus into a particular type of work, even within the overarching realm of being a PMC. So you could specialise on convoy support. You could sort of ditch the gunships, maybe bring in something like a Hammerhead. So you've got the larger engines to keep up with what you're supporting. You could create a specific sort of wolf pack, just about going out and raiding those supply lines, or have a host of dropships for conducting ground operations. You could even at this stage consider sort of rolling an awful lot of this up and just getting a Kraken, and having a fighter bomber squadron that you can fly off the back of that. So there's lots of options, whereas I've kind of gone for a bit of a jack of all trades fleet. And I think sort of with 30 people, sort of possibly your best bet is to experiment with different types of gameplay, and then focus in and be sort of the high end crew who do that thing that you're specialising in. So finally, we've got the 100-person fleet. So at this point, I'd look to bulk out that core with the addition of an Idris as your new flagship. So I did consider adding a Kraken as a means to bring more fighters to a battle, but the Idris does still fill that carrier role with the capacity for 3 fighters. And I just feel it's a much meaner ship in a direct fight. It also provides you with a bit of a sort of something to work towards as an org as well, because it would take some effort. You can buy the Idris as an Idris P, which is sort of the civilian version. And by default, it comes without that size 10 railgun. But if you get your hands on a size 10 railgun, you can add that, and basically with the parts, you can basically improve an Idris P until the point that it's effectively an Idris M. So the stated crew on this one is about 28, but some of those positions could be filled out by AI. The way I sort of envisage like NPC crew and AI blades is like they're never going to be as good as a human, a well-trained up human. But I think you do have to remember, sort of if you're an org leader, that you have to try and make sure that your members are having fun. And so I can see sort of AI filling some of the less glamorous roles on board bigger ships. You know, nobody wants to give up 2 hours of their time on a Thursday night to man point defense turret B at the rear right of your capital ship. Keep an eye on the horizon for any torpedoes coming in from stealth bombers, but chances are they're not going to fire a shot in anger. So blades and NPCs should give you the option to basically free your org mates up to take on more interesting roles. So then I'd continue to build up the core fleet around that Idris, keeping the Polaris for its torpedo complement, a duo of Perseuses for dealing with enemy corvettes, and then we've got a Hammerhead to provide you some solid anti-fighter and bomber cover. So in order to widen out the theatres you can operate in, I'd also include a subfleet built around ground and boarding operations. So you've got three Hercules M2s, which should be capable of delivering an armoured division, sort of made up of Novas and Ballistas. And the inclusion of a Valkyrie and a couple of Vanguard hoplites gives you the ability to drop sort of Marines into FPS range. So that could be useful for ground ops, supporting the armour, or indeed for sort of assaulting space stations or ships. We've also looked to broaden out the support fleet. So alongside the Crucible, we've also got Starfarer Gemini for refueling, with an eye to potentially dangerous areas, so it's the more military version of that ship. You've got an Apollo Medevac for a medical element to bring your wounded out from combat zones, and the Vulcan, which adds another angle to refuel, rearm, repair, but maybe sort of for those hotter zones where you don't want to risk your Crucible. We've also got a Reclaimer, and that's included for a bit of vertical integration. So if you're a decent bunch of sellswords, chances are you guys are going to have some knowledge of where you might find some wreck ships. And salvaging the parts and materials from wreck ships could be used to top up whatever your employers are paying you, or it could create a good loop in terms of keeping your own repair division supplied with parts to refit your ships with. So if you round it off with a few more Redeemers and some fighters to fit into your carrier-capable ships, then I think you've got a pretty decent, broad-ranging 100-person org. But I do think with mercenary work being potentially so varied, I think there's a case for even with a 100-person org that you could take this a number of different ways and specialize more on one particular line of work. Not worry about maybe the ground fleet and just have a pure space combat fleet if that was more what you were going for. So I think there's a lot of options and flexibility. This is just my ideas for a more sort of well diversified organisation fleet. So thanks very much for watching all the way to the end. I hope you found that interesting. It may be useful for planning your own org. And indeed, I hope it's sort of encouraging to people who are maybe considering joining an organisation, because Star Citizen is great, and I enjoy playing it solo, but I think it really comes alive when you join an organisation, and particularly sort of now at the current time, sort of groups of people can really make their own fun in a sandbox that goes outside of sort of the bounds of the fairly limited missions and gameplay loops that we have at the moment. But like I said, this was just more to get a conversation going. It's not the be-all and end-all of what I think these fleets should look like, and I really look forward to hearing your guys' ideas about what you do differently. So if you think that I've earned it by now, then please consider subscribing to the channel. It does really help me out. I'm still quite amazed by how quickly this has grown, but I've been having a lot of fun, so big thank you to everybody who's subscribed, liked, watched the video. So with all that said, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.